Music can be disturbing at times. From the history behind the production of an album to the literal sounds and lyrics themselves in individual tracks, today you and I are going to dive into 3 disturbing music albums and what makes them each so unsettling. As always, please let me know of any other albums you believe I should discuss in a future video down in the comments section below. When in need of a piece so ruthless and chaotic, look no further than the California experimental band Xiu Xiu to deliver something so sonically blistering, yet fearless with the unhinged lyricism from frontman Jamie Stewart. I want you and I to take a look at their 11th studio album, Girl with Basket of Fruit. On the surface level, one may find the noises and sounds bleeding out of this 9-track piece of abstract musical poetry to be nothing but a loud disturbance. A blend of all things noise and barking percussion, subdued with rare pockets of hollowed pianos, synths, and these vocal performances as if you're watching a man break down in a dark, musty open mic night. But leave it up to Xiu Xiu to show no resistance in talking about all subjects from strong issues and tragic injustices to pure lyrical insanity underneath the radioactive debris that is Girl with Basket of Fruit. And I know that's a lot to start this video off with, but there is a lot to talk about with this album. So a quick note about myself personally, I've never really listened to much of Xiu Xiu before. The only project I think I've sat through in its entirety up until the making of this video, of course, is Xiu Xiu plays the music of Twin Peaks, a reimagining of Angelo Badalamenti's emotional and one-of-a-kind score to one of my favorite shows of all time, Twin Peaks. I've always known of the band and how dynamic their presence has been for so many listeners. I've heard of them in passing, and I've always been recommended to check them out for the channel due to their catalog of music that just varies between pop tendencies to straight up harsher and more vicious cuts. And because of that, Xiu Xiu always seemed like this sort of yin and yang musical folklore to me, if that makes any sense at all. Beginning in 2002 by singer-songwriter, producer, and multi-instrumentalist Jamie Stewart, Xiu Xiu had released 10 studio albums before Girl with Basket of Fruit. The name Xiu Xiu comes from the film Xiu Xiu the Sent Down Girl, a moving and crushingly intense 1998 Chinese drama that takes a look at the tragic journey of a young girl trying to return home after being manipulated and violated countless times throughout her story. The film was banned in China, and its symbolic themes and shining light on policies at the time relate heavily with the symbolic ambitions Jamie has put forward with many of the releases in the Xiu Xiu discography. Just like the film, Jamie does not shy away from using his platform to shed light on harsher issues, and the jarring and bombastic abstract musical approach Xiu Xiu brings to the table is often hard to look away from. It just works. Before we get into what may be one of the most horrifying songs I've ever heard, let us take a look at the overall sound design of Girl with Basket of Fruit. Released on February 8th, 2019, this configuration of Xiu Xiu saw Jamie Stewart working with co-producers Angela Sio and Greg Saunier, all partnered up with a variety of instrumentally diverse guest appearances. It seems to me that many Xiu Xiu releases, and I'll further understand this I'm sure once I dive deeper into their work, find that perfect boundary between radio-friendlier art pop and jagged, more industrial sound design that would be off-putting, to say the least for many. The direction for Girl with Basket of Fruit tends to lean a bit more towards the abrasive side of the scale. Some tracks will retain some sort of groove or catchy moment, but it's hard to sink your teeth into any of the rhythms, as Jamie's vocal delivery doesn't obey much to the command of the instrumentals per se, taking charge as the leader of the bunch. And this also correlates into the understanding of Jamie's lyricism here as well, where many of the tracks cross over into just pure abstract absurdity and wacky wordplay, besides the track Mary Turner, which is very upfront in what it's about. We will get to that shortly. The out-of-left-field lyrics are definitely a big thing to observe within Girl with Basket of Fruit, and all things considered, it seems pretty obvious that the band knew this would be the case as well. There is a wonderful breakdown on the Talkhouse media outlet, a guide to Xiu Xiu's Girl with Basket of Fruit, that actually features Jamie giving a track-by-track tour of the album. The article also features Angela choosing her favorite and least favorite lyrics from each song. And I really love an article that allows the artists themselves to kind of take the wheel in the discussion of set music. And it's really fascinating to see Jamie's perspective on how people can absorb the work of Shushu lyrically. He starts off the discussion with, "Normally, I try to avoid making public any overt explanations as to what any of our records or songs are about lyrically. Whenever asked, and although it is quite fair to pose a band this question, I will usually say that it is not my business to define these things for the listener. One's own thoughts don't need any of my inane disruptions. Obviously, I have my own ideas about the lyrics, but the hope is that anyone who might check them out has their own experience, good or bad, expanded or null." Girl with Basket of Fruit kicks off with a track of the same name, and as an introductory track embodies many of the practices you'll see scattered throughout the rest of the album. Stewart's spoken word howls over a variety of drums in a sort of ritualistic manner. In regards to the design of the mix, this track and the album as a whole sounds exquisitely ferocious, and you can thank the variety of layers, instrumentals, and recordings that vary in quality and clarity for that, clashing together to create an untamed amalgamation of sound. It's rough and it's imperfect, and there's a sense of urgency and importance in Jamie's vocal presence on top of everything. There are times where you can envision him pointing a finger in your face as you're being held down by the frenzy of Xiu Xiu's instrumental henchmen. Also, he can get his voice out there regardless of how uncomfortable you feel. And then there are tracks like The Wrong Thing, where you picture him crawled up into a ball crying in this corner as you battle with your fight or flight instincts on whether or not you want to actually approach him. Say hello to blistering tracks like Scissors, a mangled concoction of percussion, shrieks, and a person whispering in your ear, always seemingly right behind you. And then there's tracks like Ice Cream Truck. They feature these harsh and jagged washes of noise, distortion, and howling horns, all providing the foundation for powerful vocals to reign supreme once again. And then, this is contrasted by longer, stretched out moments, going back to that track, The Wrong Thing, where you always still feel a bit uptight and you always feel like a jump scare is right around the corner. I love when the album jumps from its quieter moments to its louder moments, and this can happen multiple times throughout individual songs themselves, and the activation of these drops and sudden rises make them feel that much more powerful from one another. One of the more literal, distinguishable tracks on the album, the one I was making note of earlier, goes to the 7th track on here, Mary Turner, Mary Turner, a track about a woman who was lynched for protesting the lynching death of her husband Hazel in May of 1918. Mary was 8 months pregnant at the time, and Jamie doesn't hold anything back when telling this horrific story exactly how it unfolded only just a century ago. What makes the track so disturbing is that it may seem to have the same wicked or horrific imagery and lyricism as all of the other tracks it sits next to on the album. However, this track is a literal account of what happened at this moment in time. It's simply Jamie telling the events of this atrocity. The album finishes off in a weird way on this emotional, liquid-filled keys and distant vocal flooding just piece of just, I don't know, all your senses leave at once and you just feel weirdly relaxed. It's called Normal Love, and it embodies a quaint emptiness that you just reflect on the debris of the previous 8 tracks. It's a perfect closing for an album like this, and just kind of seals away everything we went through. Girl with Basket of Fruit can manage to have a sort of groovy or dancey feel at times, although it's rare, and I find it even hard to label these moments as groovy or dancey. These uncommon moments give you some necessary space from the blistering beats you aren't sure you can handle any longer. The track Pumpkin Attack on Mommy and Daddy is a good example of this, but even that track is just like this explosion of craziness. So it's really weird how the whole album works out. It definitely piqued my curiosity into staying for the whole ride and to now see what else the band has to offer. It seems that there are more cohesive releases maybe in the Xiu Xiu discography that handle concrete meanings or messages with a clear, more polished approach towards lyricism, and that many may see some of the lyrics or moments on Girl with Basket of Fruit as pure nonsense or rambles with shock factor nothingness. But even here, I think these insane moments from Jamie embody the idea of how insane some of these moments in history are at large. Xiu Xiu's generalized view on many of the horrors committed throughout history can only be best embodied into a musical form in this exact manner. Absolutely hellish and adrenaline-filled rampage with no rhyme or reason at times. When the world was never given upfront answers for many of the evils committed throughout time, why should we have to get them from Jamie? Xiu Xiu doesn't necessarily owe us anything. And hey, this is at least how I'm soaking it all in. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. which I honestly don't care if I am, because it further emphasizes what I think the album ends up accomplishing. Stepping away and looking at the album as this purposely inaccessible piece of sound ironically explains everything about the lows humanity can reach. It is clear to see that Xiu Xiu is a vessel to tell the stories that need to be told and need to be remembered, no matter how disturbing they are, or how accessible the way the songs are presented, Mary Turner being Exhibit A. It's this intensity in songwriting that makes anyone take a step back and do a deeper search into what's being spoken here. I rarely find myself curious to look up lyrics to songs, even in times where I can't understand what is actually being said, but here I was just so intrigued to have it all laid out in front of me and look up the full lyrics to these songs online. Girl with Basket of Fruit just did its job in getting me to stay curious beyond anything. Usually with an artist, I'll find myself comparing them to another group or act in regards to their sound, artwork, and overall aesthetic, just to kind of build a picture in my mind better, but I've never experienced anything quite like Xiu Xiu before. I'll boil it down to an audio art style intended to shock and cause discomfort beyond the sounds alone. When you think of Bruce Springsteen, I'm sure you think of projects like Born to Run or Born in the USA, weathered anthems that have developed into American classics over the years. There's this unique sense of pride found in those who enjoy his work. We tend to think of his sound as a fighting force for the working spirit, those who give and give some more just to get by. The legacy surrounding Bruce is really funny and interesting to me. I mean, he's pretty much a legend in my area, being from New Jersey. However, I find it so fascinating how many of us overlook the messages being spoken about in his tracks. Born in the USA is actually a pretty dark song lyrically, a war protest song focused on the economic struggles many experienced when returning home from war. Yet you'll usually find it blasting on the Bluetooth speaker at a barbecue, generally consumed as a party starter background track to a game of Flip Cup. Enter 1982's Nebraska, Bruce's sixth studio album, which is universally considered to be his most raw, dark, and personal album to date, focusing on the lives of real-world criminals, murderers, and the average Joe who just found their breaking point, those who feel empty, lost in the world, and are struggling to get by. An honest look on existential doom through 10 acoustic songs. Coming off of the massive double LP The River 2 years earlier, Nebraska saw Bruce record the songs as demos on a 4-track cassette recorder on January 3rd, 1982, giving the entire album a feeling as if you're sitting right next to him in a musty room. He intended to record the tracks with the E Street Band, but decided to record them on his own, which really gives the album its unique texture compared to the rest of his releases. Instead of grand performances and larger-than-life instrumentals, you'll pretty much only find Bruce, his guitar, and a harmonica on Nebraska. Instead of focusing on excitement and the rush of being mischievous in our youth and chasing happiness as seen in his previous albums, Nebraska goes in a completely different direction. The opening track, which is also titled Nebraska, takes on a first-person perspective, focusing on the true story of a man named Charles Starkweather who murdered 11 people in the late 1950s with his 14-year-old girlfriend at the time, Carly Ann Fugate. The song dives into themes of meaninglessness in the world, and those who resort to violence as a way to cope with whatever possible confusion they've experienced throughout their time here on Earth. Bruce pulls inspiration from American writer Mary Flannery O'Connor, whose 1953 short story of A Good Man Is Hard to Find bleeds its way through Bruce's lyrical narratives. Justifications into the mindset of a psychopath. The last line of the song states, "I guess there's just a meanness in this world," ripped from O'Connor's ending of A Good Man Is Hard to Find with, "It's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best way you can, by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure, but meanness." The song revs up the start of the album with this blaring harmonica. It sonically feels like a 5 a.m. alarm clock starting off the work week. And as you'll see with the rest of the album, don't expect more than a guitar and harmonica to surface from Bruce, setting the stripped and desolate mood for the rest of the track list that follows. Tracks like Johnny 99 focus on a man who gets released from his job and shoots a store clerk while drunk in the middle of the night. He's sentenced to 99 years in jail, but requests to be executed instead. Where the opening track, Nebraska, focuses on the psychology of those deemed insane and unfathomable for their acts. The bleak nature of events that take place in Johnny 99 paint a picture of an act purely done out of pain and unhappiness. It's utter despair in its purest form from a person who's just a regular person and loses their job. The track is based on a real-life incident from Mahwah, New Jersey in 1980. Storytelling brought to life through nothing but vocals, a guitar, and a harmonica once again, the audio design embodies a rundown side of the highway gas station. It all has this rusted and gritty sound terrain, all further fueling this image of a tired, defeated individual acting out in violence as a result of life events. You question if you want to feel bad for him, or if he's just pure evil. Now, Judge, I got debts no honest man could pay. The bank was holding my mortgage and taking my house away. Now, I ain't saying that make me an innocent man, but it was more in all this that put that gun in my hand. Johnny 99 was also covered by Johnny Cash a year later, as well as setting the name for his 1983 album, which features covers of Johnny 99 and Highway Patrolman, which you guessed it also comes off of Nebraska. The track Atlantic City details a man looking to make ends meet in any way he can, someone down on their luck who would resort to illegal activities just to get out of the mundane and confined life of working a low-end honest job. It's just another track on here lyrically that I absolutely love. It once again details a person who it's almost hard to not feel bad for despite whatever evils they may have committed or are about to commit. Is it just another soul crushed from the despair of trying to get by within the constructs of what we created for society, or are they simply just a lost cause? A couple escaping to Atlantic City with a man seeking work in organized crime, Bruce details the decaying 70s and 80s of Atlantic City, a once thriving and successful resort town in South Jersey, which at the time aimed to introduce legalized gambling in order to help aid the city in remaining as a desired spot for people to visit. The song battles with the idea of uncertainty, the acknowledgement of one's faulty justification of their acts, and keeping the one you love sheltered in hopeful reminders, despite how hollow you know those reminders are deep down. Now, our luck may have died, and our love may be cold, but with you forever I'll stay. We're going out where the sand's turning to gold, so put on your stockings, baby, because the night's getting cold. Springsteen wrote and recorded these songs during his time living in a rental in Colts Neck, New Jersey. Doing everything on his own, there is a really strong sense of isolation and reflection in these works that you just don't find on many of his other releases. Yes, as mentioned earlier, Bruce has discussed darker themes before in his works, and there were even a couple recordings during the Nebraska sessions that found their way onto his next album, 1984's Born in the USA, but you won't find that same genuine richness as what you will find within Nebraska. Richness is such a weird term to use here when describing a piece of work that is basically very depressive in nature, but there's something so powerful here that just stands out from the rest. The cover from Nebraska and the singles that came off of it feature that cold black and white imagery with bold red titles, and it all perfectly captures the mood of Springsteen's creative process at the time. Nebraska is able to jump into different stories wonderfully, both those of fiction and reality, with in-between moments of maybe even romanticized accounts. The album is considered to be an absolute classic and must listen in the Bruce discography. And for those who really only know of him as that dude that has a couple of songs that come on the radio during the 4th of July or Santa Claus is coming to town when the holidays roll around, take the time to listen to this masterpiece in its entirety. Nebraska is a riveting look at the struggles of humanity that did not sell well at the time, further enhancing its legacy as being thematically lo-fi in every way possible, especially compared to the rest of Bruce's discography. It's a project that makes you feel grateful for maybe your problems not being as bad as they could be when comparing them to the characters in these songs, but Nebraska still has an ability to connect with you and understand those times where you just don't feel 100%. In a world where we're constantly told to stop worrying so much through inspirational social media posts, Nebraska takes the time to understand whatever you may be going through, no matter how serious it may actually be, and realizes that life is just hard sometimes for all of us. Simply put, it's brilliant and ironically therapeutic. It seems that the conversation for liminal spaces, those weird, eerie in-between places void of space, time, and rationality, is everywhere these days, from series like The Backrooms by Kane Pixels to the abundance of Twitter accounts posting these odd and uncomfortable empty screenshots. I've even done an entire video focusing on a music album solely responsible for my fascination with these liminal spaces. I believe my appreciation for the album in that video, Infinity Frequencies Between Two Worlds, which is a 2018 classic from the mysterious Signalwave subgenre, I believe my fascination with the album comes from the fact that it delivers the feeling of liminal spaces through audio form, instead of how we traditionally experience liminal spaces, which is visually through mediums like an image or a video. And while that album's personality is so further fueled by its cover as well, there's no way to deny it, as well as with the album I am focusing on in today's video, Hantasi's Liminal Spaces, clever sample selection and where to make that chop and where to place it and when to place it can make all the difference in making a project feel powerfully empty. Albums like these capture that opportunity to make such an impact on that setting conjured up in your mind, and their sample curation is just as important as the artwork itself in getting you to the feeling of being in a liminal space. The California-based Hantasi is known as a legend in the vaporwave scene, and just like every other video I mention them in, they are mostly known for what many consider to be the first ever Mallsoft album of all time, their 2012 release of the iconic Vacant Places, a dark entry into the world of the generally optimistic and angelic Mallsoft subgenre that would be later brought to life through artists like Cat System Corp and Groceries. But this video will once again serve as another example of why I beg you to check out the rest of their amazing discography beyond Vacant Places. And better yet, if you are an enjoyer of that album, I do believe you will find an attraction to the darker nature of Liminal Spaces. Hantasi's ability to bring these moods to life has always declared them as one of the greats in this uncanny corner of internet music production. On January 7th, 2021, Liminal Spaces would be released. 19 tracks as well as an additional 3 bonus tracks to give the album a pretty lengthy listen, especially when many other Signalwave releases can feel like they've ended before they've even got going. For a deeper dive on the Signalwave subgenre as a whole, you can check out this video I made from a while back. I will be sure to also link it in the description down below. Liminal Spaces contains 22 haunting tracks that beg to be pretty, although you know the slightest touch of these tracks would turn their illusions into a pile of dust. Good Signalwave, for my taste at least, comes down to the artist's ability to create a narrative through their sound design, the talent to make a sample feel extremely brittle and delicate, all while having the density to tell a story. It's a fine line to walk, and after reaching out to Hantasi to get some insight on the album, they stated that the creation process of Liminal Spaces has exemplified the entirety of their shape-shifting career. They're always anchored in the uncanny but oddly peaceful, spacious sounds of Hantasi's own dreamscapes, whether they come as a casual daydream or a deep sleep. The opening track on Liminal Spaces is titled Northwest Plaza. It's the optimistic buzz after the long and haunted lonely tour of the mall in Vacant Places, a proper finale to that album as Hantasi likes to put it themselves. To me, the track feels like you're on an abandoned boat ride. There's no workers to operate anything, there's no guests accompanying you on your journey through the river of unplugged animatronics, so everything feels so hollow despite it all looking normal at the surface level. The track Same Old Dream blends in traces of echo jams with its distant, echoed vocals washing over some heavily diluted guitars that are saturated in that classic reverb vaporwave effect. It's a sort of psychedelic mall tour experience, wandering in and out of different catered shop decor. Meaningfulness and meaninglessness live in tandem together here. Delayed and decayed sample loops flip through a heavy dosage of filters and echoes. Hantasi's signature taste in sample curation is always perfect for the moods their projects are trying to portray. Tracks like Remember, for example, feels so carved out yet so heavy, staring into the depths of a dark room where you can't see the wall on the other side. Yet, you know something has to be there. Hantasi aimed for this track to be Motel Jazz mallified, a late night fuzzy buzzing worldly wonder all packaged into the nice shape of a dated but upkept motel. The track's shopping mall background is the pensive dread of Hantasi resenting their past, where they've been and how Hantasi got here, all while nihilistically basking in the actual piece itself. Hantasi states it as an intense and reflective soundscape meant to freeze the listener just as it froze time for Hantasi as well. Unfortunately, I do not believe there are or were any physical releases for the self-released Liminal Spaces. Hantasi albums like Vacant Places were brought to life in such beautiful ways on labels like Geometric Lullaby, and a cassette, vinyl, or even CD of Liminal Spaces I think would look great. The album is pretty long at almost 2 hours in total runtime and would require something like a triple LP to even bring it to life. But like I always say, bring on some more Vaporwave triple LPs. I really do love the idea of what you can do with gatefold packaging for vinyl, and a project like Liminal Spaces is just perfect for that. Each puzzle piece of this trackless jigsaw feels like a different liminal space entirely. It's one of those albums that each of us will have a different experience with because there is no concrete narrative this album is trying to construct per se, but instead just a narrative that conjures up the idea of liminal spaces infinitely. Where I may picture a track like Hello to take me to an abandoned aquarium, for example, that track was sculpted around the idea of spaceship-like design and the aesthetic of Apple's new main campus, according to Hantasi. And that specific track may take you somewhere completely different. Hantasi's Liminal Spaces delivers that uncanny open-world nature for anyone that takes the time to dive into its track list. I suggest making a nice cup of coffee or tea, turning down the lights, and listening to this album in the dead of night. I was inspired to find out that each of these tracks were derived from so many different places, memories, and senses for the producer. Liminal Spaces is so much more than sampled selections with some effects behind a photo of a stereotypical liminal space. The album is gorgeously empty and blissfully expansive at the same time and in all the right ways. If you're looking for a journey into the unknown, you found your listening for the night.